Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Volunteers Podcast. My name is Josh Denhart. Grateful that you're here. Hey, got an exciting interview today with a very, very good friend of mine, actually. So, Brian Dollar, he and I have been friends for a while, but you know what? Sometimes you just find those people that you got a special connection with. So, I'm grateful for Brian. We're going to have a great conversation today about something that's often overlooked. And so, grateful for you today, Brian. Thanks for being here with us.
I am glad to be with you. And there's the dollar bills, of course.
That's right. So if
I
you're watching,
wanted to ask you in our pre warm up, are you throwing dollar bills at me again?
yeah,
But
did,
there they
did,
are. There they are.
did I show you that before? Is that on your the other interview? Did I do that?
Yes, it
Okay.
was
Well,
right after you had done confetti for
Michaela White.
Yancey, I think. Or no, it
Okay.
was for Michaela. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so I was like, "Hey, do I get my confetti?" And you said, "I got something better."
yeah, that's it. So if anybody is watching on YouTube, of course, Brian Dollar, I had an overlay of a bunch of falling dollars. So you can't beat that. Can't beat that. Well, Brian, grateful that you're here, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
I am happy to be here, and I know that you've got a very attentive and responsive audience. So I'm excited to be able to have this conversation with you and hopefully bless them in the process.
Absolutely. Well, here's the deal. We're talking today about senior pastors and the relationships they're in. So, of course, we want to define it, we want to develop it, and finally, we want to have your help so that we can do it. So, number one, healthy relationships with your pastor. Help us define that as we kind of start out.
Well, I have been serving my pastor, Rod Loy. We've been together for 23 years.
Wow.
He wasn't the lead pastor the whole time. He was executive pastor for about 2 years before he became lead pastor. While I was with him anyway. But we've been working together, and I've been working under him and serving him for 23 plus years. So
Wow.
there've been a lot of highs. A lot of lows. We've had some bumps in the road, some issues that we've had to work through and deal with, like any other relationship. But ultimately, we have such a great working relationship. If I can kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Sure.
He and I have actually been writing together for, goodness, almost 20 years now. We started back in 2005. Where I would write for the kids based on his message for the adults. And so the whole family could be on a learning journey together.
Yes.
We would take writing retreats and kind of flesh out what the year would look like. We travel together a lot.
Wow.
And even then, we spend a lot of time together, not just at work, but I think in the last week I've been at his house twice, and we were at dinner out at a restaurant last night. So we actually get along, and we actually have a good relationship together. So that didn't come by accident.
Yeah,
though.
that's what I was going to say. Those things happen by intentionality. Am I right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're talking about. And by the way, the reason why we're talking about this is by and large, a lot of staff people typically don't have a great relationship with their senior pastor. That's why it's an issue.
It's very true. And I do a little bit of traveling around the country, but when I talk to staff pastors and even those who are volunteers on their staff, when I pick up on the fact that there's not a healthy relationship there,
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll hear, well, I'd love to do big things in my area of ministry, but my pastor doesn't share my vision, or if it weren't for my lead pastor, I'd love serving at my church. I mean, when you hear that just breaks your heart. You're like, oh my goodness, that's a horrible place to be. But a lot of times when I hear that, and Josh, you jump in here, but I begin to wonder, what do you, as the staff pastor, what do you think is the cause of that? If there's a rift, if there's not, if you're not together, if you're not on the same page, who's to blame? Most of the time, staff pastors, they have in their mind, pastor's to blame because he's the leader. He's supposed to be the one who's kind of setting the tone for this relationship. And so if it's not, well, that's their part. That's their fault. It's their job to lead me, not my job to help develop this relationship and help it be healthy. So That's a very backwards way of looking at it.
Right. And so, in other words, kind of like the second big point that you've provided for us is often people think that it's the senior pastor's job to tend to and make this relationship great. And what you're saying is it's not just their job.
No, any relationship is a two-way street,
That's
right? I
right.
mean, there's no relationship, husband and wife, friendship. I mean, you and I, we've been friends for 10 plus years, I
Yes.
think, and it's not just me calling you, or it's not just you texting me. We both participate in this
That's
relationship, and
right.
we reach out and we pray with each other. We do all the things that are
It's true.
needed to build a healthy relationship. And so,
Even to the
you
point
know,
where when there have been challenging things in each one of our lives, there's been a reciprocal
yeah.
relationship where we lean into one another. That's what a relationship is for.
Absolutely, it's a two-way street, and lead pastors don't come in a one size fits all. I realize everybody's situation that's listening here or watching. Um, there's a vast array of personality types that are leading their churches.
Yep.
Um, there's a lot of history there. There may be some issues that they're carrying. There's a lot of different things that you can say affect a relationship and make it good or bad.
Agreed.
But what I've found is that there are some key actions that you can take and some key principles that you can believe and put into practice that no matter what your situation, these principles and practices will help develop and maintain a healthy relationship with your lead pastor.
Okay, so what we're talking about today is senior pastor, lead pastor, staff people. We like you got to get along. It's really, really, really important thing. However, it's not all on them.
Yeah.
So take it away. Where should we start, Brian?
Well, the best place to start, I made a commitment long ago. I pray for my lead pastor and his family every day. It's part of my daily time with the Lord. I pray. I just and I've told him I have a commitment to pray for him. I pray for his walk with God.
Yes.
I pray for wisdom in leading our church. I pray for the spiritual vitality of his family. Listen, I pray for his marriage, and I pray that he and Cindy will have a thriving relationship, and that the enemy will not be able to drive any kind of wedge between them. Um, when you pray for your lead pastor, even when there is an issue,
Mm-hmm.
here's what it's an old saying. I don't know who to give credit for, but I love it and I live by it. Um, Sometimes what we do when there's an issue, we go and we talk to other people about it instead of talking to, number one, your pastor, or talking to the Lord. See, when you talk about people to people, you'll grow to hate them.
That's
But
right.
when you talk about people to the Lord, you'll grow to love them. And
I
so,
think that's true. I just had a podcast interview with somebody, and we were talking about volunteers and how to shepherd and love them. Interestingly enough, the number one point was to pray for that problem volunteer because your heart is going to grow in terms of your love for them. It is
yeah,
almost, as this person on the podcast said, it is almost impossible to harbor bitterness or hate or anger for somebody that you're praying for.
exactly. And that's the thing, is that a lot of times that tension builds, and it's not always based on horrible sinful things. I mean, it's just relationships have tension
They
sometimes.
do.
You want to go this direction, they want to go this direction, and sometimes there's not good communication, whatever. But when that tension arises, when there is an issue, uh, we exacerbate it by uh, just holding it in, or
Right.
or just talking with others, instead of just releasing it to the Lord and letting him, number one, probably change our perspective, because most of the time those feelings are a result of us just deciding to be very selfish in our perspective. So he helps me see things differently, but also he helps heal the wounds that sometimes happen. I mean, my pastor has said things that really hurt my feelings. He had no
Understood.
intention to do that. He
Understood.
wasn't trying to, but man, it cut deep, because he's somebody I respect and love. And when he thought it was just kind of an offhanded joke, it cut deep. Well, guess what? When I began to pray through that, the Lord began to remind me of the depth of love and care that my pastor has for me, and how he would
Absolutely.
never, ever do something like that on purpose. And so suddenly those feelings disappeared. And I never had to go and say, hey, you said such and such. Well, we didn't have to have that moment because
Right.
God changed my heart and he helped me see things a little clearer. So pray for your pastor daily.
I think that's huge. So, number one, pray daily for your pastor. And I think a lot of people out there who are listening to this, Brian, I think that I just am going to make an assumption that a lot of people are kind of like, that's new for me.
Yeah.
I really do believe that. And I think that, there's an unknown, unwritten barrier often between the senior leader and the staff. Not because I remember a senior pastor said to me one time, "Hey, listen, when the senior pastor speaks, it's with a bullhorn. He doesn't
Yeah.
even intend to. If he has any small criticism, it's taken with a bullhorn. If he
Yeah.
says, hey, I didn't really like how that went, that's almost as if he's screaming that because he's the senior pastor holding a bullhorn. So we have to stop and say, is that the bullhorn speaking and I'm hearing it as a bullhorn, or is it truly he's coming down on this, right? So my encouragement to those that are out there, make a commitment, 2023, make a commitment to pray. All right, number two, what do you got, Brian?
I own my pastor's vision. I don't just understand it. I don't just know what it is, but I own it. I am. We have to realize, as staff leaders, as
Mm-hmm.
staff pastors, we are an extension of our pastor's heart and his
That's right.
ministry. The only reason why I have the position that I have is because my pastor can't be everywhere all the time.
That's right.
He's the leader of the church, and he has asked me to come alongside him to help flesh that vision out. So, if we can kind of, most of my background is kids ministry. So, if I
Yes.
could speak to that just for a second, kids ministry leaders have the toughest time with this because they're not in the sanctuary most of the time. So
Right.
they're not hearing their pastor's messages. They're not hearing his heart. They see him maybe in staff meeting, or if they're a volunteer, they don't even see that. And so they end up being in a situation where they don't even know their pastor's vision.
Right.
And so I encourage them, hey, it's your responsibility to know it. And so you need to get the recording or watch online
Sure.
during the week of the pastor's message that week. You need to let that sink deep into your heart, and then you need to communicate that to the kids and express that as much as you can with your ministry team. Own your pastor's vision
Right.
and communicate that to those you lead, and suddenly that helps you understand what makes him tick. It helps
Mm-hmm.
you understand what allows your pastor to to how they feel about your community, about
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
when you own that, suddenly there's kind of an invisible what am I trying to say, a tie that
Yes.
binds the two of you,
Yes.
and
A
that's
connection.
important.
That is important. And I would say that here's the way that I've thought about it, Brian. If if the church that I'm serving at was smaller, and then even smaller, and then even smaller, the senior
Yeah,
pastor would probably be running the children's ministry at some level.
yeah,
So stick with me.
overseeing, volunteer, whatever.
Overseeing everything. I remember the
Yeah,
senior pastor that I had when he planted his very first church. He did the children's message every single week in front of the kids. The kids came up. He did every single role. And it was
yeah,
only as the ministry grew that somebody, that like a leg of the stool needed to be added for the thing to
yeah,
prop up. And then it grew a little bit bigger. And so I am truly, and some people might say, hey, listen, I'm my own man. It's all good. But the church he happens to be the guy. And if it was smaller, he'd be doing it all. The reason you're there is that he can't do it all.
I fully agree, and that leads me to number three.
Okay?
And this might be a little bit controversial, depending on what background people have and the way their church is structured. But in my setting, and in what I think personally is the best way for us to operate, I have to understand that I'm a servant first to my lead pastor, then to the church.
Right.
So in that relationship, he is who I answer to and serve first. and the church is second. And the reason why I bring that up is because I think a lot of times people try to play us against each other. They try to say things like, well, if you were leading this church, you would do da 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 da. Or if they know there's a little bit of a rift, they say, well, I took your side. I believe you whatever. Listen, that will, if you allow that kind of talk,
Right.
you allow anybody to speak those words to you, even if you don't out loud agree, just by you listening to it, you are condoning that spirit and that attitude. And I don't care who you are, it will affect you. It will poison your spirit. So
Yes.
do not even listen to that kind of mess.
Well, you know what
Realize that, yeah,
the
go ahead.
Proverbs say that the words of a whisper go deep into the bones. They go deep.
They do.
And you
And
can't unhear that stuff, and it becomes toxic and poison.
Yep. And here's the deal. Your pastor deserves to have staff members who will stand beside him with integrity and with loyalty. And that doesn't mean, that your pastor is the best, most perfect person ever. No, they have flaws and they probably do stupid things sometimes. But you have to trust that God has you in the place that he has
Yeah.
you for a reason. And so you serve your pastor gladly and you value your pastor's vision and heart. And do not let anyone in the church drive a wedge between you and your leader.
Yeah.
That will destroy the church in a heartbeat.
Well, I'll never forget one time I was in my senior pastor's office, and we were talking about some stuff, and it was appropriate inside of the conversation. I said, I just want to let you know how often I defend that which you do. And maybe you make a mistake. I want to let you know that I'm defending that, and I am flanking you to make sure. And that can be really hard sometimes when it's like,
Oh, yeah.
okay, this was actually a decision I don't agree with. And
Yeah.
listen, you can disagree behind closed doors, and I have. But when that meeting is over, it's a unified front, and that's the way that it goes.
Well, I'll just go ahead and jump into it because that was one that's coming later, but I'll just
Okay.
make it the next one. I may disagree with my pastor in private, but
Mm-hmm.
never in public.
Been there,
That is
lived that.
huge because we both know we don't agree with every decision that our pastor makes.
And that's
And
not the message that you're sending. It's not that all of a
no,
sudden
no,
this is just like lockstep uniformity. Behind a closed door, I may give some serious pushback, and I did.
absolutely. Yeah, you're not agreeing. Here's the deal. My pastor wants me to disagree with him in private.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to push back. He wants to hear the other side. And most of the time, I mean, he's a pretty brilliant dude. So he's thought about it a lot before he brings something to the
Sure.
table for us to talk about. But sometimes he's missing something and he just didn't know about. And so he wants us to provide that other side. But there have been times, even when I give him the other side, he says, we're not going that direction. I feel very strongly this is what we need to do. Well, I felt just as strongly that the other thing was what we needed to do. But guess what? When I walked out, after he said, nope, this is what we're doing. I didn't go to the people and say, well, I wanted to do this, but Pastor Rod, he said this is what we're doing, so I guess that's what we're doing. No
Yes.
way. I walked up and I said, hey, we discussed it, and here's the decision we made.
Yes.
We made.
That's right.
Because what we decided was we are going to be unified.
That's right.
Not uniformity, but unity.
Now
Two
that's a
different
big
things.
deal. There's a difference between uniformity and unity. That's
Yeah.
a big one. We could camp on that for a while. I do want to say
Yeah.
that I have watched staff leaders use what I call innuendo, which
Yeah.
which means they disagree. They were behind closed doors. They gave their opinion, and then when they came out, they were plausible deniability. I officially agreed with my words, but my body language was communicating. Which, by the way, I think it's 54% or something like that is your body language. That's
Yeah.
what's communicated. I have a stat someplace. But through innuendo, I've watched people, and I'm like, you, my friend, that's sedition right there. You
Yeah.
are in
Yeah.
absolute abject rebellion against what he's saying, and you're letting everybody know that, but your words have said that you agree, but
Yeah.
you are not agreeing. So that's kind of a challenging one too.
And if you think that he's never going to hear about that, you wrong.
That's right.
People will carry that message back to him, and he'll number one, that will be very offensive to him, but
Yeah,
also that destroys any kind of trust that he has with you.
it does. In the birds, what you say, I can't remember the exact proverb, but it says, the birds will hear it and will carry it to the master.
You are the king of proverbs, man.
Yeah.
You know them all.
Well,
Well,
Brian, as an aside, I have read the book of Proverbs every single day, a chapter a day for 25 years straight up.
wow,
That's
that's great.
been a commitment I've had. Okay, moving on. What's another one?
Well, number five, I look for opportunities to serve. I look. Now, I don't just respond to requests because I mean, my pastor, he never asks for help for anything. I mean, like he just doesn't. He's just like that. He's not somebody who's going to just constantly be asking us to do this and do that. He knows we're busy. He knows we got big plates that we have full.
Sure.
So he's not going to ask for that. But what I do is I look for places that I can fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
And so, like when I'm traveling with him, I notice that he's got his computer bag. He's got a lot of stuff when he's speaking. I want him focused on the task that he's been called to do. So
Right.
I carry a computer bag for him. I'll jump ahead and make a call to wherever we're headed, make sure everything's all put together. I'm looking for ways to take the burden off of
Fair.
him so that he can focus on what God's called him to do.
Yes.
But even around the church, I'm constantly looking for ways that I can minister not just to him, but to his family, and to ways that I can serve and take any load off of him that I possibly can. But I look for those opportunities, and I
Yeah,
always have
you're on
my
the
radar.
lookout. You're on the lookout.
Yeah. So if you look, I promise you'll see them.
And ask
And
the Lord. Ask the Lord.
Yeah, he'll reveal those things to you, and when you see it, do it.
Yeah.
If you see it, it's now you own it.
That's right.
Do it. Take care of it. Number six. Are we moving on fast
You bet,
enough?
man. You bet.
Okay. I don't want to run out of time, but number six. This is a tough one. Was for me anyway.
Okay.
I offer accountability instead of forcing my pastor to require it. I offer accountability instead of forcing my pastor to require it. And here's what that means. I don't make him come and ask me questions about something that happened because he heard about it from somebody else. I immediately, if something goes less than perfectly, I send him an email, I send him a text, I call him and say, hey, just wanted to let you know such and such happened. Had this conversation with a parent. It went like this.
Yep.
So just in case you hear about it, I want to make sure you know what happened. Listen, I don't know of any lead pastor who enjoys tracking down a member of his staff or checking on them when there's a problem. You have to offer that accountability.
Yes.
And when you do, trust is built. Because if they have to come and ask you a million questions to finally get to what really happened, you're not building trust there.
Right. Brian, here's what I would say with that. I always taught my staff, don't ever have me be caught flat-footed. I don't want to be caught flat-footed. If there's a small situation, you let me know so that when it comes to me, and it's going to, I'm not caught flat-footed and I get blocked back. And in the same way, I said, here's how I do that. And so small and large, I had a plan to let them know. I never wanted them to be caught flat-footed. I learned that because when I was a kid, my mom and dad found out about a few things that I had done, and they were caught flat-footed, and I was like, understood, not a good move.
Yeah, and the fact is they probably told you, like my parents, if you tell us something that you did, the punishment will be significantly less than we hear about what you did.
That's right.
I would try to rush home after school and tell them as quickly as possible before they got that call.
Not only that, but when an angry congregant comes to the senior pastor, and this is the first that he's hearing about it, I have not done my job.
Right.
I want him
Yeah,
to already be like, hey, listen, I'm aware of this. Josh came to me about this. We totally understand. And you know what? Here's so if all, never have them hear this first from them.
yeah, because he wants to have your back. But if he's not prepared for it, he can't give any sort of defense for you because he doesn't even know what in the world they're talking about.
And that is
This
an
first time he's hearing
extremely,
about it.
I mean, this comes under the idea of treat others as you would want to be treated. Time
Yeah,
out. I did not want to be caught flat footed when some
yeah.
parent is jamming me up. I don't want him to have to experience that.
Absolutely. So
Thank you.
don't
That's a good one.
make your pastor play detective. Take the initiative. Talk to him anytime there's a problem that he needs to know
That's
about.
right.
I mean, here's the deal. If you're going to be late to a meeting, text ahead of time.
Of course.
Uh, if something goes wrong, even if it's, just tiny, let him know. I've heard staff leaders say all the time, well, I don't want to bother him. I don't want to bother. Listen, how hard is it for him to get a text? And if he thinks, this is irrelevant, he moves on.
That's right.
But if you don't send that text, what are the possibilities of him being cornered and, like you said, being caught
That's
flat-footed?
right.
You don't want to take that chance. Just give him a heads up.
That's right.
It's correct.
Okay, final thing on that. In the absence of information, there is speculation. And I want to be a guy who gives plenty of information. All right.
That's good.
Give us our next one, buddy.
All right, number 7. I am committed to be open to correction. You alluded to it earlier. We often we take correction way too heavily.
Yes.
And we are very defensive when we're corrected. When all they're trying to do is say, "Hey, here's a little something you could do a little bit different." They may not word it that way, but any kind of correction does not have to be overblown in your
Yes.
mind, and suddenly you feel like your character's being assassinated, and
Yes.
they're coming at you. Listen, when your actions are being corrected, that doesn't mean your character's being questioned.
That's
Take
right.
it and receive it, learn from it, chill out, and learn from the challenge instead of defending yourself to the death. I had a real problem with that when I was a young minister because young people, we think we have to defend ourselves and well, you misunderstand me, and whatever. It was very easy for me to become super defensive anytime there was a correction. I've learned in my older years to just realize my pastor wants me to be the best I can be.
For sure.
And so when they correct something, that is because not only do they want that mistake not to happen again, but they want us to be better for the rest of our lives. And
For
this
sure.
is a moment we can learn. So
And I would say, agreed. And I would say that I assumed that they knew more and they had more experience than I have. And I was looking at all times, Brian, to learn the totality of the pastorate, not just how to
yeah,
be a good kid pastor. I was looking to have the totality of being a great pastor. And I assumed he knows something that I don't know. And I always assumed that posture. That's good, man.
well, and that brings us to our next one because there is probably almost always something he knows that you don't know. And
Preach that.
so number 9, if I want to have a healthy relationship with my lead pastor, I fight the thought, if only I was in charge.
Oof.
That daydreaming of, if I could make that call, here's what I would do. Some of us don't do this, but a lot of us daydream about what it would be like if we were in charge of making the decisions that our lead pastors make. And often we think we would handle the church better in this instance. But here's the deal. I spent 2 days with my pastor a couple years ago. And just in that 48 hours, the
Mm-hmm.
amount of phone calls and pressure filled conversations that he had to deal with, I had no idea the level of stress,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, and the enormity of every decision that he makes. Listen, I had a new appreciation for my pastor after that
Yeah.
48 hours. And being a lead pastor is really one of the most demanding jobs in the world because
Guaranteed.
think about it. They've got financial decisions that are huge, organizational, spiritual, relational decisions that affect a lot of people. And the bigger the church, the bigger the burden.
That's exactly right.
Here's the deal. Your pastor doesn't come whine to you about all the stresses and pressures that they're under. So you may not be even aware, but take my word for it. You don't want that
No,
responsibility.
you do not. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And of course, the other thing is that the senior pastor sits at the 100,000 foot view, and I happen to maybe sit at 30. So
Yeah.
when I am turned down on a big idea that I have, even though I may be deflated, I have to say, time out. They know more than I do. And I'll
Yep.
never forget, I have to be brief on this one, but there was a time where I had this great initiative and it was going to solve all of these problems. And I put together an elaborate scheme to pull this off. And I was told coldly no. And I was like, just crushed. Well, in a matter of 2 months, the very thing that I was trying to find a huge workaround for our whole church, that thing was being dismantled at the board level. In other
Yeah.
words, I didn't know. And so I don't know things above my pay grade. Have a little
Yeah.
confidence and have a little trust.
Exactly. We want them to trust us. How about we trust
That's
them
right. And I
to
have
make
to
the
do that.
call and realize that they may not be able to tell you why that was not going to happen.
That's
You just
exactly
need
right.
to, you need to trust them. You need to trust them. Next, I think I got two more. Is that you
You
got
bet,
time for
Brady.
that?
Keep on. Keep on.
Number 9, I tell the whole truth the first time. If you want to build trust, you better come out with all of it the first conversation that you have. Sometimes we exaggerate the good things because we want to impress people, and then we downplay bad things that happen so that we don't look foolish.
Sure.
But really, if you think about it, both of those are really untruths, because
They are.
partial truths are whole lies. That's kind of the way that I have always looked at it.
Even depending on whether you're downselling a good or a bad thing or upselling a partially good thing,
Yeah,
those are
exactly.
identical.
Yeah, and so you got to tell the whole truth the first time, because it saves a world of trouble. I got to tell you a story. I had a meeting with one of our staff, and it was supposed to be at 10 o'clock in the morning. All right. So it's 10 minutes past 10. He still wasn't there. And so I called him. And when he answered the phone, he said, "Hey, I'm on my way. I'll be there in a sec." Here's the problem: I could hear his television in the background. So I knew he was still at his apartment. Now, his apartment was right across the street from the church, so it wasn't going to take him long. But I knew he had forgotten all about it, and he was just suddenly, when he saw the phone, he knew that it was me, and he remembered. Oh, that's right, I was supposed to be there. Well, when he arrived, I asked him about it, and he said, "Well, okay, I had forgotten about our meeting, but when I saw your name on caller ID, I started walking towards the door as I answered. So technically, I was on my way."
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, his answer was technically true, but it did not inspire any confidence or trust on my part,
Right.
because I knew he was trying to deceive me. And we do that a lot, and
We
maybe
actually
not.
do this a lot. I don't
And it's
care
not,
how.
it's not it's not because we want to deceive. It's because we're trying to put the best
That's it.
coating on the difficult truth, and we just don't want them to think bad of us. Go ahead.
Anybody that's out there, I don't care how great of a person you are not only susceptible, you're plain out straight guilty of this. And so we got to be
Yeah.
cautious of this.
Very much so. And if you tell the whole truth the first time, even if it's, especially if it makes you look foolish,
Mm-hmm.
and you're willing to own up to that, and you're willing to share that with
Trust
your
has
pastor,
been built.
big time, because they know that was not easy for you to be honest
That's
and to
right.
be forthcoming.
And
They
then
didn't have to drag it out of you. You gave that, and that builds trust big
it
time.
does. In addition, when there ever is a question that they have to be like, well, I don't know, they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt when you've been that guy who's told on yourself
Yeah.
repetitively. I
Yeah.
always wanted to be the guy where I'm like, when in question, okay, because time plus consistency of behavior is a reputation. I wanted
Yep.
my reputation for them to go, when in question, here's what I've typically seen. Now,
Yeah.
I got to go on this one that you're talking about, because here's where I got burned, Brian. I wanted my way. and I had you know me, I have
Yeah.
big ideas. I want stuff. I want to conquer a bunch of things. And so sometimes I would characterize something as being worse than it was and needed a fix because it was bad. Well, I'll never
Yeah.
forget, this was going to my executive pastor at the time, and I made this hard sell. I learned a very valuable lesson because he went and observed that thing that I thought was in dire straits. And he
Yeah.
said, certainly doesn't seem to be as bad as you were portraying it. And I learned a powerful lesson. Do not cry wolf. So that's another type of deception, whether I made a mistake or whether it's
You're right.
overselling a problem.
Be honest, tell the truth.
Oh,
You
mercy.
want to develop the reputation of being someone who is always truthful, no
That's
matter
right.
how bad it makes you look.
I
Huge.
love it.
Last one.
All
You
right, man.
ready?
You bet, man. This is great.
We're gonna end on a high note. If you want to build and maintain that healthy relationship with your lead pastor, express heartfelt appreciation
Yeah.
for them, for who they are, for what they do for you, for any opportunity you get. Express that heartfelt appreciation. Don't just feel it, because feeling appreciation is great.
Yeah.
But if they never hear you express it, if you never actually tell them how
Yeah.
appreciative you are, well, I mean, they can't read your mind. They don't know.
Yes.
And so I always, especially when I hear kids ministry leaders talk about their pastor, and they're bragging on them, or they're saying whatever, I say, when was the last time you told them what you just told me? And they're like, wow, I mean, that's kind of embarrassing. I don't know. He wouldn't want to hear that. Yes, he
Yo,
would.
yes, he would.
Because I'll tell you, pastors hear all the negative all the time. I mean,
Agreed.
they get emails and calls and letters and sometimes anonymous letters about all the things people don't like. And for them to hear from somebody they've poured so much into
That's right.
and provided so much opportunity for them to hear from them that they are truly loved and appreciated, and that we recognize the
Yes.
opportunity for what it was and we value it, man,
Yes.
it makes such a big impact on them. So don't just be thankful, express it in a clear way that communicates your appreciation.
I would agree. I would also say that I was quick with pointing out things that I saw that were hard in their job and
Yeah.
that they did well. So that's a unique type of appreciation.
Good.
And I would say,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? I want to make sure nobody out there knows that you have seminary graduates sitting in the audience and you have somebody who's never heard the name of Jesus Christ, and
Yeah.
you balanced that message exquisitely.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
good.
I
It's
want
good.
to point out the things that are hard about their job and
Yeah.
say, nobody knows this. Another thing, this is number 11 because I just thought of it, Brian. One thing that I always sought to do is I would think in my mind before I marched into his office, I would say, if 10 other staff leaders came in and did this today, how would that go for him? And I would be cautious about intrusion and think, okay,
It's
hang on.
good.
Is this necessary right now? Because there's a whole bunch of other people and I ain't the only pig at the feeding trough. I need to be.
Wow. Great illustration.
Well, I mean, you know what I'm saying? All of us staff pastors, we're wanting more. We're wanting this. We're wanting that.
Yeah.
And he and the executive pastor are putting out the feed. I ain't the only mouth here, brother. And
Yeah.
so,
You're right.
but even set aside budget and things like that. I don't want to be. What does it say in Proverbs? Sorry, it says, don't often
Only you
don't.
know.
Yeah. Don't often be in your brother's house lest he hate you. So, like, give it, don't be that guy who wears out the welcome. Be thoughtful
Yeah.
because they are dealing with way more than we realize in terms of their time and their demands.
That's so good.
Man,
I in the last I don't know how many years, but a long time, I've just tried to make gratitude kind of a normal part of my communication.
yeah,
Just this past week, I think I sent him an email thanking him for a new try to phrase this properly, a benefit that he allowed several of us to be able to experience,
yeah,
that he didn't have to do. but
Sure.
he did. And it was because of his generous heart that he chose to do that. And I got to tell you, it moved my heart. And
Yes.
I told him, I said, look, you don't have to do, you don't have to do this. You go above and beyond from what I see from other bosses, and just
Yeah.
thank you for being so generous. And I thank him for, silly stuff like we have coffee in the break room. And dude, we got a bunch of caffeinated addicts in our church. And if that coffee ain't cheap, and he provides that for us, we don't have to put money in a jar and pay for every cup of coffee. He has decided that's something he wants to bless us with. I told him thank you for that.
You
I
bet.
need the lift, and it was a super blessing. You might think, oh, this is silly, I don't want to be appreciative about this. Whatever you can say to your pastor to thank him and appreciate him or her, it would make a big difference. So here's what I'm going to challenge everybody who's listening right
All
now to
right.
do. Okay,
I love it.
I want you to push pause on this podcast, and I want you to move to your text messages and send your pastor an appreciation text right now. Tell them how thankful you are to be able to
Hmm.
serve under them. And now, if there is some kind of unresolved conflict between the two of you, don't do that through text. Instead, pray about it ahead of time, and then go and just ask for forgiveness.
Hmm.
Whether you were the one who started it or mostly to blame, doesn't matter.
Just
You
get
go
it
first.
opened up. Start,
Yeah,
get it
open it up
started.
and resolve it.
Yeah,
Absolutely. We gotta take our part. We said it at the beginning of this podcast. Every relationship is a two-way street. That
that's right.
especially applies to the lead pastor, staff pastor relationship. It's got to be nurtured. It's
Yes,
got to be something that's intentional. And let me tell you, when that relationship is healthy, it blesses the
it
church, it
does.
blesses the kingdom, it blesses the world. But whenever it's not healthy,
Yeah.
it does the opposite for all those things. And so we've got to be very careful to do our part to build and maintain that healthy relationship.
I love it. I love it. This is good stuff. And I got to say there's a lot of these things that I was quite successful with. And even amid challenging relationships, God was allowing me to be successful with this. You've helped us, Brian. This is really good. And I think that I do want to encourage the listeners, literally take the challenge. Literally take the challenge and send a text immediately. You won't regret
Yeah.
it. Brian, thank you. Thank you. You've got a lot of wisdom in this. I've observed you do this well. We've been friends. This is not pie in the sky. This is like we're talking reputation. This is exactly who you are. I've watched this many, many, many times. So thank you for being with us today.
Well, you're welcome. And as the proverb says, don't talk to idiots. They'll hate you because you sound smart. I just Googled funny proverbs just to share one with you.
Oh, that's too good. That is too good. Yes, and that's the other challenge is start reading the Proverbs. No, I'm kidding. Well,
Yes,
Brian,
indeed.
God bless you. Thanks for all of your help today with this. And everybody out there on the podcast, thank you guys so much. We will catch you guys on the next one.